Hello, my name's Jim Flood. I've been stuck here at the top of this pillar for over 100 years, poking my tongue at my foreman across the way. He was a hard taskmaster, I can tell you, but a good sort. We both worked on this great church when they started building in 1884. I was a stonemason, one of 15 master craftsmen. All the carvings and mouldings you see around you are our work. It took nearly 25 years to build this place once they started, and they didn't finish the east end, up there where the altar is, until 1910. I've watched all sorts go on from my perch during the past century. You'd hardly believe all I've seen. But we should go back to the beginning. This fine gentleman is the one we have to thank for our cathedral. His Grace, the most noble Henry Fitzalan Howard, 15th Duke of Norfolk, Earl Marshal and Premier Earl of England, who was born in 1847. His is a fine old Catholic family who kept their faith during and after the Reformation. The Dukes of Norfolk now have their seat in Arundel Castle in Sussex. They say that's worth a visit, and I would have liked to have seen it, but in my day, ordinary people didn't often travel far away from Norwich. Duke Henry built churches and many other buildings all over England, and this church, dedicated to St. John the Baptist, is one of the finest. It must have cost him a fortune. Do you know, for years, St. John's, as some call it, was the largest parish church in the country until it became a cathedral. Anyway, let's hear from His Grace himself.
Sometime in 1877, I received a letter from a Canon Richard Duckett in Norwich. He was hoping to secure a new Catholic church in the city. He knew of my interest in building churches and, of course, my links with Norfolk. Happily, congregations were growing too large for the existing Catholic churches, and a larger building was overdue. After some consideration, I determined to fund the building of a great church in the chief city of Norfolk, as a thank offering for my most happy marriage in the same year to Lady Flora Abney Hastings, my first Duchess. There were at that time many fine medieval churches in the city, but not one in the great early English Gothic style, and I chose this as the style for my church. I was able to acquire the site of the old borough jail outside St. Giles's gates, which was demolished to make way for the church. The great architect George Gilbert Scott Jr. designed the building in my chosen style, and the foundation stone was laid in 1884, just 7 years after I received that first letter from Canon Duckett. A great sadness occurred in 1887 with the tragic death of my dear wife Flora. The sunken chapel in the south aisle, where the windows commemorate her 4 names, Flora, Paulina, Hetty, Barbara, serves as a lasting memorial to her. She died just 3 years after the foundation stone had been laid. The architect's brother, John Oldred Scott, took over the commission following the illness and subsequent sad death of George Gilbert in 1897, and brought to completion the building his brother had started 13 years earlier. More than 30 years after Canon Duckett first wrote to me, my great church was finished, and it finally opened in 1910. I was most especially pleased by the magnificent windows, and I took a great personal interest in the design of the Queen's window in the north transept. The second Duchess, Gwendolen, Lady Herries, who became my wife in 1902, was much involved with the design of the East End, particularly the Walsingham Chapel. Another fine feature is the splendid stone carving, much of which was the work of mason James Ovens of Norwich, who did much work for me. I thank Almighty God that despite several setbacks, we were able to complete this great work in the city.
Duke Henry died in 1917, aged 69 years, leaving this wonderful gift to Norwich. I've seen so many things over the years from my perch up here. Great processions during the National Catholic Congress in 1912, thousands of baptisms, weddings, funerals. There was the memorial service for the fallen in the Great War, terrible bomb damage to the Great North Window in 1941. Many American GIs were married here in the war, and pilots used the tower to help them find their bearings when returning to East Anglia from bombing missions. There have been lots of changes too. A few years back, they opened a special burial place called a columbarium in the crypt at the East End. The next year, they put in some wonderful glass screens at the Great West Door so I could see outside. Then there was the new high altar in 2008 and all the other improvements to the chancel. Now, after all this time, the new narthex has been built. When they were digging, they found some of the foundations of the old jail the Duke spoke of. Now, as well as showing you a very special place of prayer and worship, our fine cathedral is able to offer you a wonderful welcome. Have a good look round. You can even find out a little about us stonemasons in the narthex gallery and a bit more about our history. Then, when you go into the cathedral, you see if you can't find me, up here on my pillar at the southwest end of the nave. Cheerio.